Hello, I'm Samantha from the Makespace. You can find more patterns at www.themakespace.uk. In today's video, we're going to be sewing the Wonder Wallet clutch, and this is a fantastic project for you. For those of you who want to sew a wallet or don't like to carry a lot of things, so you just want to carry a little clutch wallet with you. It will fit your phone, it will fit dare I say checkbook, if you still carry a checkbook. It will fit a pen, it will fit your receipts, your cards, it will fit up to 12 cards, any notes, coins, anything that you want to carry, but you don't want to carry a handbag. I've got two versions here. This one is the one that we're going to be sewing in this video. I won't show you the features inside of that one because the fabric inside is all patterned and it doesn't show very well on a quick run through, but that's basically the one that we're going to be sewing in today's video, and I will talk you through the differences on the fabric. This one's got an open end on the wallet frame. I do prefer the closed end, but the open end does work as well. And then this version is the version that I'm going to talk you through. They're both exactly the same size, exactly the same, just the fabric's different. This one's got the closed ends on the frame as well, which I prefer. So inside we've got 12 card slots. We've got 6 on each side and they are sewn in the blue fabric. So you've got 6 on that side and 6 on this side. And then in the middle, we've got a zip compartment here, and that's got a nice finished end with a zip tab on one end and the ends folded in on the open end. And then attached to the zip pocket is a full width slip pocket, and that one's in the green fabric there. Let me see if I can show you a bit easier. There we go. The unique thing about this Wonder Wallet is that the zip pocket or the zip pouch is actually attached all the way along the bottom. There's just a little angle on each very end which is open, but that means that anything you put on this side of the wallet will stay on this side of the wallet. So if you want to pop a pen in there, keep your receipts in there, or your checkbook the other side, or your phone in the other side, it's not going to get scratched because everything will stay in the side that you put it in. The wings then, I've sewn these out of red fabric just to show a contrast. So each piece in this version is out of a different fabric, and that's the version that you'll see in your pattern. So all the pattern photos use different fabrics for the different components so that you can see them a little bit easier as you're constructing your own Wonder Wallet. The wings haven't got any raw edges showing there. That's all nicely finished off in there. There's no interfacing in the wings, so there's no bulk. There's very little bulk in this wallet at all. There is the heavy stabilizer. I've used Decaville Heavy in the outside and in key places, and then there's interfacing just along the tops of pockets, tops of card slots, tops of the slip pocket, and cut out of the seam allowances for the zip pocket as well. Okay, so that's what we're going to be making, the Wonder Wallet clutch. I absolutely love this pattern. I think it's going to be a real hit with you because it's such a great size. It's quite a quick project. As I said, there's no bulk really. The scariest thing is cutting the hole for the frame, but I'll be doing it with you, so don't worry. Grab your materials together and let's get started. Let's start off by looking at what we need to make the Wonder Wallet clutch. So I've got my wallet bar frame here. That's got the screws inside as well. I'm just leaving that all wrapped up until it's time to add that at the end, just so I know I've got all the pieces for that. And then I've got my wallet exterior. I'm using this navy floral print. And then on the back, I've applied my interfacing, and I've got a 1/2 inch or 1.2 centimetre gap down the long edges, and on the shorter edges the interfacing goes all the way to the top. Okay, and I've also marked my centres on this, which I know makes a change for me, but I have done that. And then I have got 2 B pieces, and I've gone ahead and marked mine just to save a bit of time, but we'll talk through that in a second. And to go with this, you should have 6 pieces of interfacing that are 1/2 inch or 1.2 centimeters tall, and 2 pieces that are 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters tall. I've added mine. I've done one of my pieces already so that we can just get on and fold that, and you haven't got to wait for me to cut them and interface them and do all of those things. Anyway, so that's B. Sorry, go back to A, main piece. To accompany that, I've also got a piece of Decaville Heavy and 4 narrower strips of Decaville Heavy as well. Okay, these will be applied right at the end, and these ones, these narrow ones, in case I forget to tell you, are going to go one on top of the other, and they're going to go at the short ends like that. But we will apply those later on, so we can ignore those for the minute. In fact, I'm going to put them under my table. Okay, so we've got A, we've got B, the card slots, and then we've got C, slip pockets. You could do this out of contrasting colours if you like. You could do that out of your exterior fabric, no problem. And you should have 2 pieces of interfacing that are 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres tall. I've applied mine, but I'll talk you through that once we come to C. And then D, 4 zip pocket pieces. And I've already applied my interfacing for that. You can see the interfacing has got these corner cutouts. So just make sure that you're applying, once you're applying your interfacing, you're applying it with those corner cutouts towards the bottom if you've got a directional print. And then E, zip tab, that's a tiny little piece, not interfaced. And then F, 2 wings. Again, those are not interfaced. If you've got a really strong machine, you can interface that as long as you keep it out the seam allowances. But I haven't interfaced mine. It just reduces the bulk. We'll give you a sturdier wing, but you need a really, really strong machine to be able to do that. So I don't want to do that on my video because I don't want to confuse those people who haven't got a really, really strong machine. Okay, so we can pop these to one side for the minute, and we'll get started on B, our card slots. So I'll put all of the rest of those down there. Okay, so as I said, I've done one already just to save a bit of time, but I'll work on the first one now so that we can sorry, I've just dropped a pin. If I don't pick it up straight away, I'm likely to forget. I'll work on the first one so that you can follow along, and then the second one, just to save you having to fast forward me or pause me or anything. I've done that already, so I'll put that to one side. That's what we're aiming for. Okay, so we've got our pieces of interface, and I'll pop those to one side again. Now, what I've done on this one is I've just used regular pencil. Okay, it does advise in the pattern to use 2 different colour pens so that you can track which line is having which, but I've just used regular pencil for mine because I want to use this wallet afterwards for myself. So I'm going to talk you through it. Now I'll turn it so that it's facing you. Can you see that? Okay, yeah. Okay, so at the top you're going to write either top or T, and that's what I've done just here. Ta-da! And then I've also marked my centres so that I can check that everything is nicely aligned once I've done my pressing. And then in the pattern it gives you the measurements of where to draw your lines. Okay, so we're just going to follow those and draw the lines. I'm not going to give you the measurements in the video because it's really hard to follow and watch video and take the dimensions from a video. So they're in the pattern, they're ready for you. Okay, so you should have 6 lines, and the interfacing, the little strips, is going to be applied just underneath the 2nd line and the 4th line and the 6th line. Okay, so these are going to go underneath, so you're going to alternate. So the top one doesn't have any interfacing, then the next one does. No, yes, no, yes. Okay, so I'll get my little ironing board out and we'll fuse those. The interfacing is shorter than the width of the, or narrower than the width of the fabric. We want to keep this out of the seam allowances as much as possible. So we're just going to make sure those are nicely centered, and you want them literally just underneath the line. In fact, you know, I'm just going to give this a little press first because it's got a little bit of a crease. I'll give it a bit of a spritz of some water because I've got my tiny iron up here today. I must apologise, we're in the middle of a named storm again. It feels like we've spent the whole of the year in named storms so far. So I'm sorry if you hear any hail or thunder or wind or anything outside the studio. Hopefully the microphone won't pick it up, but just in case. Okay, so we're going just under the line and we're sort of centering. You can measure and do this properly, but I'm just judging it, eyeballing it they call it, don't they? Right, so just under the line, and this just gives a little bit of extra stability to our card slots. So these interface lines will end up being the top of the card slot. Okay, so I'm just gently pressing that into place. Okay, and then on the very bottom, so this is the top of my panel up here. This is the top up here, you can't see it because I've got it pulled up too high. This is the top up here. So on the very bottom of my panel, we're going to add this thicker piece of interfacing. Again, make sure that's centered nicely. And that goes right along the very, very bottom edge of the panel. Okay, and then I'm going to, just because I've got my tiny iron and not proper steam iron up here, I do like to add a little bit of steam when I'm pressing interfacing. Just give it a little bit of a spritz with some water and then press it all over just to make sure that everything's adhered and everything's nice and flat. Okay, now in the pattern it gives you the measurements of how far should be between each line and how far should be between the top and the bottom and how much it should measure at the end. I would urge accuracy on this one. This is the only part, well, I don't know, I suppose this is one of the only patterns that I've designed where accuracy does actually matter. Normally it doesn't really matter too much, but in this case it does, unfortunately. Right, I've got the pattern with me, so I'm just going to double check every step because I'd hate to tell you the wrong thing, especially because this is the tutorial and you're probably following it just to make sure that everything does go correctly. I've got a jumper on today as well and the sleeves keep falling down, I'm sorry. Right, okay, so what we are going to do, here's our first slot. Okay, and we're going to fold this right sides together along the first top line and we're going to press it. Okay, so for ease I'm just going to turn it over and follow that first line and just make sure that I am very accurate on that top line there, and then we'll press along that top line there. Okay, just get my Hera marker. Right, now we're going to alternate between folding right sides together and wrong sides together. Okay, in order to be accurate, I'm just going to score along the lines that have got the interfacing attached using my Hera marker. You can just use an empty ballpoint pen or something like that is fine as well. So I'll line my ruler up on that line and then just give it a little score, and this will really help with those folds to make those nice and accurate and crisp. So I'll score along just, and that's directly on the line, which is just above that piece of interfacing that we've added onto each of those places. Okay, You can also, if you you want to be very, very, very accurate, you can also add maybe a pin into each side of the lines, or you can do a little tiny snip. Remember, the seam allowance is very, very small on this though, so don't snip too far. I'm going to add some pins so that you can see where it is that I'm folding. I haven't got glass head pins up here, so I'll have to make sure that I take these out before I press, otherwise we'll have nice melted pins everywhere on the video. I'm going to alternate my colours, so I'll do black for the ones that have got interfacing attached and white for the ones that haven't. Do that to each of the lines. Just gives us something else to follow, doesn't it then? Okay, right, I'll get my little ironing board back again. This next bit is all pressing, really. Now, if you are getting confused by the pictures or by the video, then just follow the instructions on the pattern, or just remember, alternate. So we've done one right side together, the next one's going to be wrong sides, then right side, wrong side, right side, etc. So we've done our right sides together. So now we want that one to be, the next one to be wrong sides together. So you can either leave it folded like this, and if you do, then just pay attention to the size of the gap between that fold there and your next line, or you can leave it unfolded like that. No, sorry, unfolded like that. Do your press and then refold it. I think I'm going to leave mine folded so that I can double check that everything's lining up on the side edges and with that gap there. Now I have got a tiny ruler, so let's have a look where we are. Okay. So I'll just make sure that that is nice and accurately lined up all the way along. That's pretty good. And then I'm going to start from the centre, because remember, I haven't got heat resistible pins, unfortunately. Just need to make sure that I don't catch those pin heads. Okay. So through those layers, we should have our nice crisp press there on that line. Once I've finished this and I'm sure that it's all completely accurate, then I'll give it a little spritz of water and press it again. Right, so we've done one right sides together, one wrong sides together. So the next one is right sides together. So I'm going to flip my panel over and fold along the next line, right sides together. And just make sure I'm really accurate on that. And you can make sure as well that your side edges line up as well, because then you know that that's nice and accurate. And I'm going to press from the centre, just because my pins. We can trim this down later, but because we've got the interfacing attached, we don't really want to be trimming. We'd rather have a nice accurate fold to start with. Okay, so let's double check that before I move on. Yeah, lovely. Okay, so then the next fold, we are going wrong sides together. Had to think about it there for a second. So we are folding along this next set of pins, which mark my line. And in theory, that's a nice accurate fold. So I'll just double check it from this side. That's not too bad there. Just move that edge in a little bit. And there again. I know it's a bit long-winded being so accurate, but in this one it really does make a difference. Okay, nice press, lovely. And then right sides together, so I'll flip it over again and fold along that next line. And double check before I apply my heat to it. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Everything's lined up at the sides. Okay. Isn't it funny? I do very, very little ironing when it comes to clothing, but I wouldn't dream of making a bag or wallet or purse or anything like that without pressing. Okay, so for the final fold, flip over to the other side, and I'm just going to double check now that my spacings are accurate. That looks pretty good there. Pretty good there. Okay. Before I do that final fold, I'm just going to double check the height of it. And all these measurements are in the pattern, but it should measure 5 inches from the top to the bottom, which is 12.5 centimeters. Mine does, so I'm going to give that final fold a little press, and then I'm going to give it a little spritz of water and another press just to make sure that those folds are secured. Double check I haven't moved that while I was pressing. Yes, I have slightly. That one can fold up. Now the wonderful thing about using an ironing board that's got holes in it as opposed to a wooden board is that you can pin things into place. So that's not quite accurate. I'll just give that a little shimmy. There we go. I can pin top and bottom to make sure that that is accurate. And that will hold it while I'm pressing then. You've just got to sort of feel around a little bit for the hole in the ironing board underneath. Oh, I don't think I have got a hole there. Let's see if I've got one in there. Got one at the top, not so much at the bottom. There we go. Okay. Right, so that's nice and accurate. This is better with glass head pins because you can press on them obviously and they won't melt. Okay. Little spritz of water. Now, when I press, I want to make sure that I'm pressing straight down and not moving around on the fabric, because you don't want anything to wiggle out of place. You want to press straight down on those folds. Take those 2 pins out so I can go right to the edge. And I'll just go a little bit closer to the bottom because you've got the folds underneath there as well, remember. Okay, lovely. So I would recommend letting that just cool a moment before you do anything with it. That should keep its shape pretty well if you let it cool. Okay. I don't think I've ever in my life been so pedantic as when I'm making card slots. Measure and measure again. Now that I'm happy that that is accurate, I'm just going to add a couple of clips in to the sides to make sure that that stays in place while it cools. And then we're going to sew along the edges. Remove my ironing board so you can see what I mean. I'm trying to move that without shifting my folds. So once that's cooled down, I'm just going to baste along each side edge to hold those pleats in place. But for the minute, I'm going to just get on and press my second set of card slots, and we'll come back once I've pressed those and they're ready to sew. I have of course told you a porcupine. We are going to stitch along the top of each fold first before we do our basting at the side. So now that this one's cooled down, I'm just going to unfold it slightly, and those 3 folds are like little mountains. So we've got 3 mountains and 3 valleys. We're going to stitch along the mountains. So if I turn this so that it's facing you, we want our right side to be on the top of the card slots, on the top of these. So as you unfold it, we're going to be sewing on this side and that side of the mountains, okay, these lines. So I'm going to use my slightly longer top stitching stitch length, hold my threads. There's no need to back stitch at this point, so I'm just leaving my thread tails long. Now if you're doing both together, you can of course cheat slightly and stitch both in one go. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm sewing at 1/8 of an inch or 3mm away from the edge. I can take my first one and bring it back. So I've stitched my first mountain, so I'm going to do my second one. And you'll be able to feel that you're sewing through that line of interfacing there. And that's just going to give your card slots a little bit more structural integrity in use while you're popping your cards in and out. So I'm just sewing each line and then bringing the other set of card slots and going straight from one to the other. My final mounting on this piece. Got a loose thread there, we go. And I should have one more mounting to stitch on this side. Yep. We'll be crossing over these lines of stitching. Oh dear, lost my spool of thread. It's fallen off there, not sure how. I'll have to rescue that in a second. Right, so we can refold these and I just want to make sure that those are still the right height even after stitching. Yep. So now I can clip them at the sides, and we are going to baste the edges on these ones now. Once I've rescued my spool of thread, that is. Got some long thread tails left over, so let's pull those out of the way. Okay, just double check my measurements, check they're nice and square and lined up, nice and neat. Before we baste. Right, I'm just going to rescue my threads and then we'll come back and baste those. Right, this is probably why you shouldn't leave the paper top on the thread spool when it's poking out, because it gets caught. Right, I'm going to sew from the bottom to the top on this side, and I'm just sewing over where those folds are. You don't have to sew from the very bottom of the panel to the top. You just need to sew over those folded edges, and we're sewing at an 1/8 of an inch or 3mm away from the edge, just to hold these folds in place. And we're going to try really, really, really hard not to move or wiggle the folds whilst we are basting. So it'll ensure everything stays lined up then. There we go. Trim my thread tails. I do have a terrible habit of leaving my thread tails and then wondering why I've got loose threads everywhere in my final item. Right, once you've basted the sides, I'm going to baste the other sides of this one, and then we're going to divide that in half so that we've got space for 6 cards in each side. You could leave them long if you only carry in notes or paper money. It's up to you, but if you want to carry cards, you will need to divide them so that they're the right size. Okay, and this side. Had a little pucker underneath there, so I've just flattened that out. There we go. Trim my threads. And one more. Okay. So fortunately, earlier we marked the centres at the top and the bottom, didn't we? Yes, Samantha, we're all saying we did. And now we are going to regret not bringing up the grey chalk marker. Okay, I've got a white chalk marker, which is going to prove tricky to see, but there we go. So I'm just going to join up those 2 centre marks from top to bottom. Well, from bottom to the top of the card slots. You don't need to sew all the way to the top of the panel. You only need to sew from the bottom of the panel to the top of the card slots, and just a stitch extra really over those card slots. I'll mark this one as well, seeing as I'm working, apparently I'm working in pairs today. That's okay, I suppose they'll both be done then, won't they? Okay, I've put enough white chalk on there that hopefully I shall be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to sew from the bottom of the panel to just above the top of the card slots, take a couple of back stitches and then pivot and sew back down that line to the bottom again, just for a bit of extra reinforcement. Again, I'm going to start with my thread tails long. Oh, I need to change my stitch length back to my top stitching stitch length rather than my basting stitch. Can take a little back stitch there if you want. You don't really need to, because you can tie your thread tails off, but you can. Right, so as I'm coming up to the top of my card slot, I'm just taking an extra stitch and then back a couple and then forwards a couple, and then lift my presser foot and pivot. So I've left my needle down in the fabric, and then I can go forwards one, back one, and then I'm sewing back down that original line of stitches just to reinforce it. So you should have 2 lines of stitching with some back stitching at the top, just for a bit of extra reinforcement. There we go. Okay, lovely. So that should be nice and neat. You can test your cards in there if you would like. However, you just remember that you're going to be losing about a 1/2 inch because of your 1/4 inch seam allowance on either side. So they will be slightly too big at the moment. Right, I'm going to hold my thread tails again. And all I'm doing is exactly the same, sewing up that line to the top of the card slots, and a couple of back stitches, and then lift my presser foot and pivot with the needle still down, and then sew back, do a couple of back stitches again just for good measure. So back down that original line to the end. Okay, and that's my card slots done. At this point you can give them an extra press if you'd like, or you can just put them to one side, and we're going to move on to the zip pocket next. Okay, so pop these card slots to one side, retrieve your zip, and we'll get going on our zip pocket. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is use our zip. I'm using a continuous zip, so I've cut mine slightly longer and we'll cut it down to size. If you are using a fixed length, then that's still fine. We'll cut it down to length later. It does tell you in the pattern what length to trim it to, but what I like to do is finish off my open end first and then trim it later. So I've cut my continuous zip so the open end is matching, and we're just going to fold it at a right angle like so, so that the raw end of the zip matches the raw edge of the zip tape. And then I'm just going to add a few hand stitches to hold it in place. It doesn't matter about being neat on these because they are not going to be seen, they're going to be inside your seams, which is lucky because my hand stitching is absolutely shocking. Okay. These stitches are literally just to hold this in place until we sew it into the seam. Okay, so that's one side done, and then on the other side I'm just going to make sure that it matches up evenly. It might take a few goes folding to get it even. That looks pretty good to me. Okay, and then again just a few stitches in this side edge. Sorry, I had a bit of a cough then. You probably wouldn't want to hear that. Right, so I've just gone down the edge there, a few stitches to hold that together. I can snip that thread then. Tie my knot ready for the next time, because we'll need that hand needle later. Right, okay, so I should have nice and even top to my zip, and then we're going to trim this to have 5 3/8 of an inch or 13.6 centimeters of zip teeth. So I might be best lining up with my little ruler instead. Does 1/8 of an inch is a bit easier. There we go. So 5 3/8 of an inch there-ish. Okay, and we're just going to trim that down to size. Lovely. Okay, not a very long zip, but it's long enough for what we need. Should have measured twice before I cut really, but I've measured twice now. Measured twice in the end. Okay, so now we need our zip tab. That's piece E. Very small piece, but it's, again, that's all we need. And then on the wrong side, we're going to draw a line 1/2 an inch from each short end. That is 1.2 centimeters. Oh, I've just pulled, what have I pulled? Oh, I've pulled my hand needle out. It's on the floor. Okay. If anybody comes in to see me now, I'll have to shout, stop, mind the needle. Although if somebody came in to see me now, I'd be slightly concerned because I'm on my own in the studio. So that I would have a shock. Right, so I've drawn a line 1/2 inch in because we're going to fold over by 1/4 inch. So if you mark it twice what you're folding in, then you can just fold that raw edge in to the line and you've got your 1/4 inch fold over there. I'll just get my sleeve board for this. It doesn't need the big, I say the big ironing board. Even the big ironing board's not very big, is it? Little spritz of water. Haven't got any steam on this little tiny iron. It could, but I find it always leaks, so I don't. Right, so I folded the raw edge in to meet that line, and then the other end, do the same, raw edge in to meet that line. That gives us a 1/4 inch fold over. Okay. Just to make sure they're nice and neat. Turn it over and press again. It's one of those things where I don't want to get scalded fingers, but I do want a nice accurate press. Okay, so once you've folded your ends in, then we're just going to fold that in half so the raw edges match up. Give it a little press like so. Okay. Again, it's very small, but that's all we need it to be. Don't want to waste space on our wallet, do we, with excess things. Okay, we need some double-sided tape. I keep mine in a little bag because I find that the studio is quite damp and it loses its stickiness, so I keep mine in a little bag. I still find that I have to cut a little bit off each time though. Right, so I'm just going to cut a piece and stick it on that fold over in there, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. Of course, they always land glue side down, don't they? Oh, where? Oh, I don't know. There's no. Oh, it's still attached. I don't know what I'm doing with this sticky tape. Let's cut it there. Don't know what's going on with that. The tape came off without the backing. Okay, so I've got a piece of tape on each fold over, and then I'm just going to pop my zip in to match the raw edge of the zip with the raw edge of the fold over. So I've only got 1/4 inch of the zip inside that little folded over bit. Okay, and then fold this over to match, and it should match accurately. And then we're going to double check that that zip measures 6 inches or 15¼ centimetres, 15.25 centimetres if you are working in metric. Okay, now we're going to stitch this into place. I'll keep my tape out because we'll need that again. So we're just going to stitch it into place across the folded over section, and we're going to sew a 1/8 inch or 3mm away from the edge. I'm starting my needle down. I'm leaving my thread tails long on this one. I'm using my top stitching stitch length for this one, which is slightly longer than my regular stitch length, just because it makes things look a little bit neater. Now, rather than just cut these, I am going to tie them because it will stop these threads coming unravelled while we are working with it. And then once we've sewn it into place, then it'll be crossed over by another line of stitching anyway. But just to make sure that they don't come unravelled while we're working with it, just give them a little knot on each end. And that end. Just a couple to keep that in place. Lovely. Right, so we've got a nice neat zip ready to put into our zip pocket. And we need a zip pocket. There we go. Now let's double check that my interfacing is the right way round. So they're all the same, so it doesn't matter which piece you use. You've got your corner cutouts if you're interfacing. I'll lay my pattern piece on top so you can see. Those corner cutouts are the bottom. Okay, so when you are working with this, make sure that you're applying your tape to the top edge, not the edge that's got the corner cutouts. Okay, let's see if I've got better luck with my tape this time. It's very similar to how you would make a zip pouch, really. Okay, now I have marked my centres. Let's mark the centre of my zip as well, just so I can get everything nicely lined up. Because it's not quite the full length because of reducing bulk in the seam allowances and things, something this small. Okay, so we're going to pop our zip on top and we're going to pop it right sides down, matching up the centre first, and then all along that top raw edge of the zip pocket, I'm going to line up the edge of the zip. Okay, so let me undo my zip slightly. We're going to sew this into place, or we're going to baste this into place. Let's have a look. Double check the seam allowance on this one before I tell you the wrong thing. Right, we are going to use the regular 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to swap down to my construction length stitch length. Hang on, I've forgotten something. It's a good job you're watching the professional video for the tips of what not to do, isn't it? We need another layer of fabric, of course. Or you can baste it into place there, it doesn't matter. Line another line of basting tape along the top there. And then we'll add another piece of fabric. This time, right sides down. Okay, so make sure again that your corner cutouts are on the bottom edges, and we're going to line up the centre and then match all along that top raw edge along there. Okay, so we're right sides together on our fabric with the zip sandwiched in between, and now we're going to sew at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, or 6mm if you are using metric. I can only excuse the fact that I've been working on other patterns since I wrote this. Between writing this, going out to test, and then filming the video. So please accept my apologies, getting confused. So I've stopped part way along with my needle down, just so I can move my zip pull out of the way. And then I can lower my presser foot again and carry on. There we go, so I've sewn the entire length of the top there. Double check that's all good. Yeah, all good on that side. Okay. What we're going to do is fold this back, give it a little press, and then top stitch. Just going to give it a finger press for the minute though. Just because of getting my tiny ironing board out. Okay, and we're going to top stitch. We double check we're going all the way along. Yeah, going all the way from end to end. I'm going to start with my needle down, swap up to my top stitch in stitch length, and I'm sewing at 1/8 of an inch, or 3mm from the edge. Stop with my needle down and lift my presser foot so I can move the zip pull out of the way, and then lower my presser foot and carry on. Okay, and trim those because those are going into another seam. And then we're going to repeat the same for the other 2 pieces of fabric, and I'm just all the time checking that I've got the bottom corner cutouts on the bottom of my panels. Give that little snip. Okay, so a bit of basting tape there, and I'm going to line up my centre again, my zip right side down, matching up these raw edges along the top. Another piece of basting tape, and then I'll put my final piece of fabric on top, again right side down. Make sure the bottom corner cutouts are at the bottom again. Okay, so what I've got is essentially these are my 2 lining fabrics, although they're from the same fabric. I've got the 2 previous pieces sewn in the middle here, my 2 new pieces and the zip sandwiched in the middle, and then we're going to sew along the entire top, again using that 1/4 inch or 6mm seam allowance, my regular construction length stitch length, back stitching at the start and the end, and I'm coming up to where my zip pull is. Or I could take this pin out now, that centre pin, which will help my zip pull move out of the way a bit easier. I could do with a 3rd hand really for moving zip pulls out of the way. And then lower your presser foot and carry on to the end. Okay, now I think I went slightly wibbly there. I did go slightly wibbly there. So I'm just gonna go over that little section there and go unwibbly. I think I lost concentration for a moment. There we go. Shouldn't really matter too much because once you fold it back and top stitch, it'll come back in line. Okay, let's open that out again, and we're going to fold these layers back, and should press them, but I'm just going to finger press them because I don't want to have to get my ironing board out. If you've got a separate ironing board, then that's great. And then we'll top stitch along this edge. Yes, this way. And we are using slightly longer stitch length, or I am, and sewing at 1/8 inch or 3mm from the edge. Lift my presser foot, move my zip pull out of the way there. Okay, going all the way to the end there. Lovely. Okay, get rid of my loose threads there. Oh, and they've come back again. They were obviously attached. Right, so now we've got our zip pocket. I've got the 2 outside pieces on the right side of the zip and the 2 inside pieces on the wrong side of the zip. Okay, and we're going to pop that to one side for the moment. We're going to add the slip pocket onto it. Okay, so if you wanted a contrast slip pocket, you would cut it from a different fabric from these outsidey zip pocket pieces. Okay, so pop your zip pocket to one side for the minute, and then we want to retrieve our slip pockets. Here's some I've cut earlier. Ta-da! Okay. I don't want to lose those pattern pieces because I'm going to make another one of these. Right, so now we're going to pop these right sides together, making sure that your interfacing is on the top edge. So I've got interfacing on the top edge there and on the top edge here, matching those 2 together. And we're going to sew along the top interfaced edge only. Now remember, our seam allowance here is 1/4 inch or 6mm, so that's what we're going to be sewing along. You should be sewing just along the very top of that interfacing strip, because we place that 1/4 inch down from the top. Okay. So I've sewn all the way along the top, back stitching at the start and the end. And then I am going to get my iron out, because I do want a nice finish on this one. I'm going to give that a little press. I might give it a little spritz of some water while we're here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just open this out and press it against that top seam. It's always a good way to get a nice neat seam, is press it open first and then fold it wrong sides together, and in theory that top seam should sit nice and proud. There we go. Okay, we're going to top stitch that, so I'll pop that to one side for a minute. And while we've got the iron out, I'll just give my zip pocket that I should have pressed earlier, give it a little press, just so that's also nice and neat. I know I've already top stitched it at this point, but a little bit of steam pressing always helps. Well, I didn't spritz it, so a little bit of pressing always helps, I guess. Right, okay, now we are going to top stitch. So that top sewn edge is where we're going to top stitch along. We're going to sew an 1/8 inch or 3mm away from the edge. And I've left my thread tails long because we're sewing this onto another piece, so there's no need to back stitch. Now retrieve your zip pocket, okay, and we're going to leave it opened out as it is at the moment. Okay, so I've got my 2 layers on each side. I'm going to place the slip pocket on top of the zip pocket like so. Okay, I know it's the same fabric. I needed it to be the same fabric for my photos, unfortunately. So it's, you could see that I had made it with the materials listed in the pattern, but if I just flip it up like that, you can see that that's the slip pocket placed on top of the zip pocket. And then we're gonna just baste that into place around the edges and the bottom, the side edge there, and the side edge there, and along a couple along the bottom, just hold it in place. And all we're going to do is we're just going to baste it into place using a long stitch length, using an 1/8 inch or a 3mm seam, or well, away from the edge really. Okay, so just for a bit of extra stability, do a little back stitch at the start where that pocket starts, and then go as close as you can. Oh, I've gone too far, I've gone off the end. Go back one. Okay, leave your needle down, lift your presser foot and pivot, and then along the bottom edge to the corner again, lift the presser foot with the needle down, pivot. Sometimes I find if you're using a basting stitch, you can't accurately get into the corner, so I take a sort of a diagonal stitch across that corner just so I can get into an accurate position. Okay, right, so I've back stitched at the edges where that slip pocket starts and ends, just back stitch there, and then sewn around the entire outside. Okay, lovely. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to sew the corner cutouts of this panel. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit tricky, so pay pay attention to my layers here. Okay, so this is the layer that's got the slip pocket on. Here, I wonder if I could maybe put my pattern piece in there, make it a little bit more obvious. Okay, oh, it's going to be slightly too long though. Put it in there. I don't want to sew my pattern piece into my piece, do I? Right, sorry. Okay, so that's my zip pocket layers, 2 of those, like so, with the slip pocket attached. Now I'm going to open up these other 2 layers. So I'm going to pull this top layer down to meet that bottom layer, and then the other piece I'm also matching onto that bottom edge. Okay, so I've got my right sides facing with this piece that's got the slip pocket sandwich in between. I'll show you again. Okay, so I'm going to bring my top layer down to meet the bottom layer there. I'll add a clip just to hold that in place, and then the other side, bring that down to meet the bottom edge also, so that they are matching. Okay, would help if I clipped through all the layers at once, wouldn't it? Right, so it's a little bit of a funny sandwich there. It's a bit ruckled up inside, but don't worry, as long as these corners are matching. Mine are not quite, so I'll just readjust those. And all we're going to do is sew the corners. Okay, we're not sewing the bottoms, the edges, nothing like that, just the corners. We're not following the line of interfacing. We are going to draw on our triangles, corner triangles now. Okay, so we're going to make a mark that's 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimeters away from the bottom and the side. Make that mark there and there, and then we're going to join up to form a triangle. And it should follow the same angle as your triangle of interfacing, but be 1/4 of an inch further down. So you've got about 1/4 of an inch without any interfacing on. Just add a pin to keep that in place there. Oh, now I have forgotten to take my pattern piece out. Wouldn't it be silly if I ended up with a pattern piece sewn inside after saying I don't want to sew my pattern piece? Oh dear. Okay, aren't you glad you opted for the professional video rather than the one from Michelle, which probably hasn't got all of these silly errors in? Oh dear. I guess at least it shows that none of us are perfect. Right, so we're going 1/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch and 3/4 of an inch for our marks, and then join them up to make our triangle. Like so. I will add a pin just to hold it all together. Now we're going to sew across those lines, along those triangle lines only. Okay, not sewing along the sides, not sewing along the bottom, just along those triangles. Okay, I'm going to back stitch at the start and the end of these triangles. But a change from my basting stitch to my regular construction stitch length. I'm going to start my needle down, back stitch, sew along the triangle and back stitch again, and then we'll sew the other corner. Okay, now these corners are integral to ensuring that our zip compartment is attached into the bottom of our wallet, but we can still add our wings. Right, so we're going to trim the extra fabric so that the seam allowance on those is only 1/4 of an inch ish. I like an ish. See, I said there were some bits you had to be accurate and some that it didn't really matter. 1/4 of an inch ish. Trim those triangles. And then we're going to turn this right sides out. Okay. There we go. So your zip, the right side of your zip is on the outside. You've got your slip pocket. Right side of your zip. In fact, I think I might have got one of these out of plain fabrics that might be a little bit easier. Yes. Okay, so here's one that from a failed experiment, but you can see here that I've got my slip pocket, my zip pocket. The side and bottom edges are raw, but these corner cutouts are sewn. Okay, so just make sure they're nicely folded out, nice and neat, rolled out nicely and nice and proud. And then we'll give that a little press. Like so, just on those little corners. Make sure they're nice and neat and everything's sitting how it should be. And if you wanted to, which I think we probably might do, we could just baste along these sides to hold everything together. Okay, because they're going to be some kind of flapping around for a bit. They're not going to be finished off at this point. Okay, so we will, let's just double check that there's no, yes, you may wish to baste along the side edges to hold the layers together. Oh gosh, it's almost as though I've thought of that already. So if I'm basting at 1/8 of an inch or 3mm seam allowance, use my long basting stitch just along those side edges to hold everything together. Make sure my finished edges at the top are aligned. Okay, lovely. There we go. Right, so that's my zip pocket, slip pocket combo just there, and we will need some card slots. So we made those earlier. Let's retrieve those. Okay, now here's our card slots that we made earlier, and we're going to place our zip pocket combo on top, matching the bottom edges. So on the card slots, make sure that your openings for your card slots are the opposite side to where you're going to place your zip slip pocket combo. Let's mark the center of that now that that's sewn. We know where the center is. Just there. Okay. Lovely. Right, so I'm going to place this on top of my card slots, matching up the bottom raw edges and my centers. It won't match widthwise, okay? It's slightly narrower than the card slots. So just make sure it's matching widthwise. My zip opening is at the top, the same as my card slots and my letter T that I wrote earlier. And then we're gonna well, we can either baste that into place now, or we can add the second panel. I'm going to add the second panel and just sew it all in one go. So here's my second panel, and my card slots are facing that way. So I'm going to pop that on top, matching centers again, and bottom raw edges. And then just clip all the way along. Okay, now the key to this is making sure that my T for my card slots are both on the top edge, facing the top edge there, and my zip is in between. So if you open it up and have a little look, this is how your wallet will look in the end. So you've got your zip at the top and you've got your openings for your card slots also facing up, facing the right way. Now on the edges here where we haven't got the bulk of those corner cutouts, I'm just going to add a pin to make sure that those layers don't shift, because you're going from a bulky area to a not bulky area. Thinner area, I suppose thinner makes more sense than not bulky. Right, we're going to sew along the entire length, that bottom edge, okay? So we've got our T's at the top, we've got our zip at the top. We're going to sew along this bottom edge here. I'm using my regular construction stitch length and our regular seam allowance of 1/4 of an inch or 6mm. Back stitching at the start and the end. I'm also going to back stitch as I go over the corner cutout triangles for the zip pocket, just for a bit of extra stability in that bottom seam. I'm sewing all the way along the bottom to the other edge. There we go. Okay. Let's have a little look, see how it looks. Very nice. Oh, there's an extra pin in there. Well spotted. Okay, very nice. We're going to press this seam open as best we can, just to reduce the bulk in that area. I'll just give it a little, might give it a little spritz. Bit of steam in the mix is always good. And press that open that way, and then I can press it open that way as well. Okay, there we go. That'll just help that sit nice and neat in our final wallets then. Okay, right, we're on to the exciting bit, the wings. So we can pop our interior of our wallet to one side. That's how it's going to look though. We've got our card slots and our zip pocket there, so that's all good. And we need to retrieve our wings. Here they are. Now actually, let's keep my pattern piece here, because it's important that we pay attention to the dimensions. Okay, so with them, they're going to be 5 inches wide, or 12.5 centimeters wide, and then we're going to fold the top down to meet the bottom. So they're still 5 inches wide, or 12.5 centimeters wide, but instead they're only 3¼ inches, or 8.3 centimeters high. Okay, and we will, oh look, I've added 2 white and 1 black pin. That's not very neat, is it? Sorry, do apologise. And I'll do the same on this one. We're just sewing along this bottom edge only. Oh, I've done the same again. Well, at least I am consistent, if nothing else. Okay, I'm just making a note there because that image could do with some editing there. Okay, thank you for your patience. Thank you for helping me develop the pattern. Right, so I can put my pattern piece to one side now. So I'm just going to sew along that bottom edge using our regular seam allowance, regular stitch length, back stitch at the start and the end. I might as well do both at the same time, hadn't I? There we go, back stitch at the start and the end, trim those threads, remove these mismatched pins. Okay. And then we're going to turn them right sides out and press. Probably better get my proper ironing board out for this, my proper tiny ironing board at least, rather than my tiny ironing board. Okay, I'll give them a little spritz. I wondered why my iron wasn't coming up into place then. It's because I was standing on the cord. Oh dear. Honestly, it's like just sewing with me as though we're in the same studio together. No airs, no graces, as it is. Right, so we'll turn those right sides out. And I want to make sure that they are folded along that seam nice and accurately. So just give it a little finger roll and a little press along that seam, and then smooth up. And they should, in theory, measure 3 inches exactly, or 7.5 centimetres. Okay. Let's do the same to this one. Give that a nice press. Finger roll this seam. There we go, lovely. This wallet is a great size for if you don't want to have to take an entire bag out, or if you've just got a lot to carry. If you like me, and you like to keep your receipts and then reconcile your spending at the end of the month, you can, plenty of room for keeping your receipts and everything in this wallet. You can use it as a clutch or a wallet. I suppose it depends how minimalist you are and how much you like to carry. Okay. Oh, hello spray bottle. Right, so I'm going to top stitch along those edges then. So both the seam that we've just sewn and the folded edge. So we're going to leave those other edges raw. The shorter edges are going to be raw, and the 5-inch edges are the ones we are going to sew. So I've changed up to my top stitching stitch length, and I'm sewing at 1/8 of an inch or 3 mil away from the edge. We'll flip that round, so we're doing both edges on both pieces. And again here. Right, I think that's all 4 edges sewn, yes. Okay. My mind wandered a bit there. I lost track of where I was. Right, lovely. Let's get these loose edges. Right. Now we are going to fold these around the zip/slip pocket. So your zip/slip pocket combo, pull those card slots out of the way because this is all we're interested in at the moment. Now what you could do, if you would like to, is fold this in half and give it a little press for it to be nice and neat. Your choice. I'm going to add a pin to the top and the bottom in the centre, just so I can be sure that that is definitely the centre, ready for lining everything up. And what have I got there? I've got the sewn edge there. Okay. Again, mark the top and the bottom. And again on that one. Right, lovely. So I've got my centres marked, okay. And then what we're going to do is we are going to fold these around this zip/slip pocket combo, okay. Ignore your card slots at the moment. I might just take a moment to trim these extra loose threads here, okay. So decide what you want to be on the top and what you want to be on the bottom. I'm going to have my sewn seam on the top nearest the zip, and then my folded edge on the bottom. I think it gives it slightly more stability. And then we're going to pop that in line with the centre. So the raw edge of my card/zip no, hang on, not card, slip/zip pocket here, in line with the center of my wings. Okay, and that should match up, so you should be able to enclose the top of this triangle cutout slightly and the top edge of my zip pocket, and then we're going to fold that around those layers like so. Okay, so just make sure that's nicely lined up in the center and aligned evenly there, and then I'll pop a little clip in there, just hold it in place. I've got little stray thread there. Let's get that now before I sew anything into place. Okay, there we go. Right, we're going to top stitch this into place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. That's 6mm seam allowance. Okay, that's very important to take note of. So you've got your raw edges here, and we're sewing along this folded edge here, which is folded over the edge of the slip/zip pocket. Try saying that fast many times, gosh. Right, so where's my threads? There's my threads. I'm going to hold my thread tails. I'm using my top stitch in stitch length, and I am going to start with my needle down, and I'm going to back stitch a few times at the top here, just to know that that's definitely secure in there, and then sew all the way down this folded edge, and a couple of back stitches there just to be sure. Okay, now yes, so right, I've sewn from the wrong end, haven't I? I should have sewn from the bottom to the top, back stitched, pivoted, and then sewn back down to the bottom. I'm going to do it the other way round on this one, because this one's for me. But for a neater finish, sew from the bottom to the top and then pivot back down again, because then your starts and stops will be at the bottom rather than at the top where everybody can see. So let's say that I've done that deliberately just to demonstrate what happens if you don't read the pattern accurately and follow your own instructions as the designer of the pattern. So that's good. I'll add a couple more back stitches just to be sure, seeing as I've done it the wrong way round. Okay, now fortunately my stitching is white and not so noticeable on camera. However, we'll all know what I've done. So if we could just not tell anybody else, that would be amazing. Right, so we've got our wing kind of secured into place with our zip and slip pocket sandwiched in there, and all of your raw edges should be hidden by that wing. Okay, so let's do it properly this time, shall we? By sewing from the bottom to the top. I'll trim my excess threads, I think. Okay, now I will open my zip just so I know that everything's out of the way. Line up on that center line and fold my wing over. Now that's not quite lined up with where I had it there. Let's come down slightly. There we go. Just want to make sure that my wings are nicely lined up for my final construction. That's very different here. I think I need a ruler. I think a ruler is always a good idea. Right, let's line it up according to the ruler. Slightly lower. There we go. Okay, doesn't really matter as long as your raw edges of your triangle cutouts and your top are even. Doesn't really matter hugely. Okay, want to make sure they're nicely sandwiched over those raw edges. Yep, lovely. Now I shall follow the pattern as instructed and start from the bottom and sew to the top, because that does make sense, and I probably put that in for a reason. So I'll start my needle down and back stitch at the start there, sew all the way up to the top and back stitch. Oh, that is neater. It's a good idea. I should put that in the pattern. Oh wait, I did. Just didn't follow it. Right, so lift my presser foot and pivot, and then so back down that same line again, back down to the bottom where I can back stitch again, and yes, my back stitching is hidden in the bottom there, much neater. So if you are going to follow my video, I suggest that you do it the way I did it after I read the pattern. Right, so I've got my wings attached to my zip/slip pocket there, and my card slots like so. So I can open that out again. So I've got card slots set either side and my zip/slip pocket combo with my wings here. Now I am going to follow the instructions in the pattern now, because it tells you where to place them. Okay, so we're going to unfold the card slots. Oh, I've done that. Okay, open the wings and match the raw edges to the raw edges of the card slots. Okay, so that's these long edges. Right, we're going to match these into place, but it tells you in the pattern how far the bottom edge of the wing should be from that center seam there. Okay, the top edge of these wings won't necessarily match the top card slot edge. Okay, so don't worry about matching that, just match it to the bottom. So let's get my ruler into place, match the bottom edge of my wing and the side raw edges there, and I'm going to clip that into place. Okay, I'm just going to sew this one at the minute so I know that that's nice and neat in place, and then I'll do the others. Okay, right, so we're basting that into place using an 1/8 of an inch or 3mm from the edge. I am going to back stitch at the start and the end, even though I'm only basting, just because I want to know that that's not going to move around in our next few steps of construction. There we go. Okay, right, we could do the same for the other 3 edges of the wings. So I've secured it into that side to start with. I'm going to do the same on the other side of the card slots, and then we'll worry about pulling it over and matching it up that way as well. I'll get my ruler and make sure that that is lined up first. And we're matching these raw edges together. Okay, we'll baste this into place. Same as we did before, just gently pull that zip and slip combo out of the way so that whatever goes under your presser foot needs to be completely flat for it to not pucker. So just manipulate the rest of it however you need to in order to get that bit under the presser foot completely flat. Okay, right, so we're attached on one side here. Okay, card slot, zip, slip, pocket, wing, all done. And we're just going to do exactly the same on the other side, but pull everything else out of the way however you need to in order to line these up. Okay, so I think probably it's a good idea for me to mark the distance first with a pin. While everything's still flat. A little bit easier that way. Oh, the weather sounds awful outside. I'm really sorry if you can hear it. It's not the best day for, I don't know, a cliff top beach walk at all. It's definitely a day for sewing. So I suppose that's lucky. Right, so we'll line that up. And line up along the side raw edges. Okay, so pull the rest of it out of the way however you need to in order to get that edge lined up properly on that bottom, sort of that bottom seam where the card slots are attached, and just pull everything else out of the way for the minute. Okay, so get that under the presser foot so it's nice and flat, and then baste that into place. It sort of nearly matches up with the top of the card slots, but not quite 100% accurately enough for me to say in the pattern it should line up. Okay, so don't panic too much about that. Right, lovely. Okay, take that extra pin out because I know what will happen if I leave stray pins in. Okay, so just pull that in line with that. I'm getting more and more clips out and not reusing the ones that I have. There we go, and then line up these raw edges like so. You want these raw edges of the wings to line up with the card slots so that when you are sewing it all together, everything is caught in the seam. And we're very nearly done. Just the fun bit left to do now. We're finishing off. Right, so we'll baste these into place, these wings. Don't be afraid to squish this however you need to, so that it's nice and flat under the presser foot, okay? Whatever you need to do. Right, lovely. Take that pin out again. Check if I've got any loose threads anywhere. No, okay. So you've got the interior of a wallet, and that does look lovely, very nice and neat. Just double check I haven't got any stray pins in anywhere else. No. Okay, so that's the inside of your Wonder Wallet. We just need to attach the exterior fabric to it now. Okay, easy peasy, she says. What we need is our fabric to start with. Here's our exterior fabric. Okay, and if you haven't already, then do go ahead and mark the centres on all 4 sides. Okay, now to attach this to our lining, unfortunately you are probably going to want to do some hand sewing, which I absolutely detest hand sewing. So for me to say that you probably want to do some hand sewing does say a lot. And what we're going to do, I've just opened up my seam allowance there on that centre seam where the card slots are, and we're going to match that. So right side to the right side of our exterior fabric where that centre mark is that we've just made, and I'm going to add a pin in there. I do prefer clips for most things, but some things you definitely need a pin. And then we're just going to manipulate this fabric around so that it matches at the edge here, the top edge. And again on the other side. And you are going to have to squish your fabric out of the way for this. Okay. Now we're just going to match up this raw edge, the uninterfaced raw edge of our exterior fabric, with the raw edge of our lining panel So we've got the card slots, the wings, everything all attached in there. And we're just lining up this raw edge. Okay, as I said before, just make sure everything's nice and flat along that seam line. Forget about what's squidged in here underneath. That doesn't matter. As long as it's nice and flat along the seam line, that's all you're interested in. Okay. And it does help to lean it on the table while you're doing it, just to keep everything lined up. Now, if you're really hate hand stitching and feeling brave, then go ahead and machine stitch this. You can start from one side, go to centre, start from the other side and go to centre. However, I've made too many of these where I've missed a layer. So what I'm going to do is I am going to hand stitch around this seam. I'm just going to have a sip of water first though to prepare myself mentally. Oh, and of course I've dropped my hand needle, haven't I? So I better pick up my hand needle first. Check my microphone will stretch that far. Yeah, there we go. Right. So it doesn't have to be neat or pretty because it's inside your seam allowance. But I just want to be sure that my layers are not going to shift as I get them under my presser foot. Okay. So just a quick hand baste all the way along here. And you know that I have experimented without the hand basting, because if I can get away without hand basting, then I do, because I really dislike it, if I hadn't already told you that. But sometimes you just need to do it. Sometimes it gives you so much better finish that it is worth it. And this is one of those occasions where I found that actually I do get a much better finish when I hand baste. Now, as we've come to this centre bit, just pull it out so it's all sitting nice and flat. Okay. All the way along. All the way along. You can tell I love hand stitching. If it wasn't for the fact that I've stabbed myself multiple times already with my needle. Oh dear, and my pins now as well. Oh, I wonder if I can get to the end with the same bit of thread. It's very tight. Oh, I might be able to. A bit on the tight side, but there we go. There is a bonus. Now, because that's so tight, I'm not going to tie that. I'm just going to snip that off and not lose my needle. I've put it there, okay? And when I lose it later, that's where it is. Right, now we're going to sew this into place. So I'm going to use my regular construction stitch length and I'm going to take my time. So I'm going to start at the top edge and I'm going to back stitch. I'm going to sew, and as I come to this middle part, you can see these layers want to bunch up here. Just flatten it out all the way along that seam line as you go, piece by piece, flatten it out nicely, and it will sew nice and flat then. Okay. I'm going to start my needle down, very important, so that as I adjust my hands, I know that this is not going anywhere and I can just pull these layers back out of the way. We're sewing with our regular 1/4 inch or 6mm seam allowance. Okay, take your time on this one. So we're just going to back stitch at the start. Oh, I'm sewing with the wrong seam allowance. There I am saying take your time, this is what we're going to sew with, and I'm sewing with the wrong seam allowance. My frame will not fit if I'm sewing with the wrong seam allowance, will it? Oh dear, silly Samantha. And of course I've back stitched about 1,000,000 times, haven't I? Luckily I didn't go too far though. I can pull these stitches out. So we're sewing with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, not 3/8 of an inch. See, it's because I always use 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So in my head, I think I go to sew and I automatically line it up on the same line every time. I'm amazed that I've managed to do it till now on the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Right, let's line it up properly. 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, needle down, back stitch at the start. I'm taking my time, just making sure that those layers that go under the presser foot are nice and flat. Now I've gotten to a point where things are starting to bunch up, so all I'm going to do is just lift my presser foot slightly and readjust, squishing this fabric right down out of the way and adjust. And the same the other side. Just making sure to maintain that seam allowance and for everything to be flat as it goes under the presser foot. Back stitch at the other end. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just double check that I haven't got any puckers in on the exterior side or on the lining side. No, everything looks good. Right, I'll take my pins out. And then I'm going to pull this exterior layer back slightly and just double check that everything is caught into place. There, yeah, sort of. Bit of my hand basting is not. Let's have a look at that from the right side. Yeah, the seam allowance is correct. It's just that my basting has gone a little bit wayward there, so I'll cut those basting stitches out because they should not be showing, should they? I've obviously gone a bit wide on those ones. That's okay. Easily rectified. Basting stitches there again. I've obviously forgotten the seam allowance, haven't I? Take my basting stitches out here as well. Oh dear. Well, at least my basting stitches are not staying there. Right, so that's fine on that side. I have got a loose thread there, so let's just trim that. And a couple of loose basting threads there. Let's see if I can pull those out from the other side. Actually, it would be better, wouldn't it? There we go. And we'll check the other side. No, I must have started off with the right seam allowance on the basting and then gone a bit wide. Okay, all we're going to do now is exactly the same on the other side. Okay, so we're going to flip our exterior fabric over our interior of our wallet. Oh, hang on, let me open that seam allowance first on the card slots. We'll flip it over and line up the centre with that central card slot seam allowance. Okay, there we go. Lovely. So I've got my centre lined up. Now I can line up the edges. Again, just squish this fabric out of the way, however you need to, in order to get a nice, neat finish along that edge. Pull that up out of the way. There we go. And work your way along. Same as we did on the other side. The only difference is that on this one, you've got a bit more fabric to squish out of the way. Can you see it's sort of all squished up in there? That's okay. It will all come right in the end once we've turned it through. And we'll pin our way from the other end in towards the centre. And then we'll have to retrieve our hand sewing needle if you are hand sewing along with me. So inside here, as I turn that corner, I could just feel the corner of a wing in there. So I've just squished it down and it's gone down out of place, no problem at all. Okay, right, hand needle, retrieve that. Let's get some thread. Not 100% convinced that I will have the exact same amount of thread as I did last time, because that was pretty good, wasn't it? It was pretty accurate. Okay, so I'm just doubling over my threads. Oh gosh, it's very long. Oh, I've done this very long, this thread. Let's hope I don't get tangled. Oh, I've lost it now. Oh dear. I think probably I've missed my morning snack. That's what I'm going to blame. Okay, right, I've got very, very long thread now. Now let's learn from my previous mistake and try not to go too wide on my seam allowance for my basting. There we go. Oh, that's a bit thick. I was trying to go in and out in one go, but I think it's a bit thick there. I'm pulling it a bit tight, so I'm just making sure that everything's all pulled out accurately and it's not bunching up. I've sort of gone in on my... See, this is why I don't do the hand stitching, because I'm just so terrible at it. I mean, I've been sewing a long time now. Just, if it can get caught up, then it will get caught up. And if I can do it wonky, I will do it wonky. I suppose I'm consistent in that at least, so that is good. Now, have I made a terrible error doing 3 stitches at once? No. What? Okay. Manage that. Phew. Okay. For those of you who are used to hand basting, oh gosh, it's all tangled up now, who are used to hand basting, I really would like to apologise for how painful this must be watching me doing this. Right, every now and then I'm just pulling it out so it's nice and flat and not caught up, because we don't want it to be bunched up when we're sewing it. Oh dear, right, must be nearly there. Now it's a little bit puckered there, so let's just pull that out on that side so it's nice and flat where I'm sewing it. Okay. No. Oh dear. I think somebody might start a petition for me to have some hand sewing lessons. I couldn't think of anything worse though than choosing hand sewing. But then I know that we've got lots of wonderful people in the sewing community who are incredibly talented at hand sewing and would much rather hand sew than machine sew. So I suppose that's where we're lucky, because lots and lots of different skills makes the world go round, doesn't it? Right, there we go. I'm finally at the end. Gosh, that was painful, wasn't it? Right, let's machine sew this. Put my hand needle there. Right, regular stitch length, regular seam allowance. Now this is something I must remember, my regular seam allowance, and you can see it's all sort of bunched up. Don't worry, okay, as long as this edge that we're sewing is nice and flat, then we are on the right track. Okay, so back stitch there, and just adjusting everything as I go, make sure that's nice and flat under the needle. Take my time to adjust, and I can feel that bulk under my hand here, but it's not in the seam allowance, so I'm just taking my time to adjust. All the way to the end. So sorry, tickling my throat again. I think it's a season for it, isn't it, really? Okay, so I'll take my pins out, and the first thing I'm going to do, as I did before, first thing I'm going to do is cut these threads. First thing I'm going to do is just check that I haven't got any puckers along that seam line. We're okay on that side. I think we're okay on that side as well, but I'm just going to double check that everything is caught in place. Okay, I have missed a little bit here, so as you can see my card slots have come out of alignment there with the exterior fabric, so I'm just going to unpick that little bit and re-sew that little tiny section there. Put a pin in so I know where to start and stop. So from there to there. Can you see it's just gone slightly skew width there? So I'm going to unpick those stitches. Of course they're tiny stitches because I'm using my construction length stitch length, so of course they're a pain to unpick, as it would be too easy, wouldn't it, if it was easy. Just want to be sure though that all of these layers are caught in this side seam accurately. Okay, right, so I've unpicked those stitches, so all I need to do now is just pull this layer in line with the edge of my exterior fabric, in line like that, and then I'm going to sew that into place, just that little part. I'll sew from this side so I can make sure it doesn't get caught up again. So I'm going to back stitch, starting in the seam allowance, back stitching, and then move on to the seam line, and then overlapping and back into the seam allowance again. Okay. There we go. Right, take these pins out and double check that extra little bit of stitching has done the trick. An extra pin there. Yes, that's lined up nicely. Just cut my extra thread there. Okay, so that's caught all of my stitching in place. Everything is nicely secured. So now we can turn it right sides out. Okay, I forgot to tell you to make sure that the exterior is not twisted, but it does say that in the pattern, so hopefully you've read through that. Okay, so we're going to turn this right sides out like so, and then we are going to give it a little press. Now that sounds nice and easy, but it is a little bit tricky because you've got these seam allowances here. Now you should have approximately 1/4 inch or 6mm of exterior fabric on the line inside. So what I like to do is just finger roll around there until it's approximately the right sort of depth. That's not bad actually. And then give it a little clip or a pin just to hold it in place, so we can manipulate this whole edge before we give it a little press. Okay, that's not bad. So all I'm doing in here is just pushing those seam allowances up inside this edge of the exterior. Because we want our wallet to be the right length in the end, because we need to fit that bar to it. So all I'm doing is from the right, or from the inside, just finger rolling those bits there. Okay, lovely. Now this is why we are grateful for stabilisers, because you look at this and you think, gosh, that doesn't look very good at all. Once we've added our stabilisers, it will be all lovely and done then. I just want to make sure that these are as accurate as they can be, and then I'm going to give that a nice little press. I wonder if we could get heat-proof clips, because that would be handy, wouldn't it? And then heat-proof for this kind of situation. Now you can either leave this clipped for a little bit while you go and get a nice cup of tea, or you can press it right away and then go and get a nice cup of tea. Right, that looks pretty good to me so far, except for needing some stabiliser. Right, I'll give it a little press and then I'll go and get a cup of tea. Except I don't drink tea. What should I have? Gosh, possibilities are endless. I use my big board for this one. Well, my big little tiny board. Right, sorry, put that away for the moment. Put my cutting ruler away. Okay. Right, so all I'm going to do now is just remove a few clips and give it a little press. Make it sit nice and neat. We will be pressing again afterwards, so don't panic too much. Just want to be sure that I've got these side seams as neat as I can before we add our stabiliser. Which is funny because normally we add our stabiliser before we sew, don't we? In this case, you definitely don't want to be adding it before you sew. I tried on one version to add my stabiliser before I added my exterior fabric, and gosh, it was not something that I would ever recommend to anybody. It was a little bit of a pain in the bum to sew that. So that's why we're adding it at the end, because we learnt from that one. I'm just working my way round, having a little press all the way round. There we go. Lovely. Okay. Right. Whew. Let's check our hardware fits before we do anything else. And then we're going to need our Decaville. Now this is sealed up at the moment, so the main thing I want to be sure of personally, don't know about you, is that I'm not losing my screws when I take this out. Nice. Right, so there are my screws. I shall put those somewhere safe. And I'm just going to double check the length of my wallet to the length of this bar. Lovely. Oh, mine's a little bit longer. Let's have a look. Have I got the right size bar? My bar's slightly longer. I might have to go and swap it for a different bar. I think that's probably a good idea. Okay, right, I'll go and swap mine for a different bar and then we will come back and fit that. Let's add our Decaville first so it can be setting while I am looking for some more, another bar. Right, so we've got our Decaville. Okay, our Decaville heavy, and it is a nice rectangle, so just pay attention to which way you're putting it in. And we want our glue side, that's the shiny side, to be facing the exterior fabric. So this is a little teensy weensy bit of a mission. Just get that in as best you can, and then we'll wiggle it around so that it sits flat. Okay, so it needs to be matching to the exterior fabric. Okay. Do you know what would have helped is if I'd marked my centre of the Decaville. Let's mark the centre. Should have done that really first. Okay. And then we'll try and get it in again. So grab all of your lining layers out of the way, inside layers out of the way, pop it in between the two layers. Remember, the glue side needs to be matching to the exterior fabric. And if you can find those centre marks, now the Decaville goes all the way to the edge of the exterior fabric. Okay, so that top edge there. Just going to pin this into place, which will help me to make sure everything's nice and flat, and then we can worry about the rest afterwards. Okay, and then the other end. I'm just pinning in the top edges. If you've got a ham or a roll, a tailor's ham, tailor's roll, that will come in handy for applying this Decaville. I don't, so I might go and get a tea towel. Okay. So my middle section is nice, and all my ends are nice and lined up. Just manipulating that middle section. Just use your fingers to get it nice and flat in there. Okay, lovely. Right, I don't think I do need a tea towel, you know. What I'm going to do, I think, is probably just press one side first and then the other. And then I can leave it to sit while I go and have a look for another frame. I must have bought that from somewhere else. Not quite accurate, that frame. Okay. Now it doesn't matter if not all of the Decaville is 100% fused into place, okay? Just needs to be fixed enough for it to stay in place while we finish up, and you'll find that as you use it, it just sort of molds into shape, then stays in place. Okay. gently heat that up so that it stays more or less in place. Okay, lovely. Right, I'm going to leave that to sit for a minute, and as it cools, it does sort of fuse a bit nicer, I find. I'm going to leave that to sit for a minute, and I'm going to go and have a look for another frame, or I might just double check now that I've got my stabilizer in. I might just double check it before I do go and find another frame. Do you know, that does fit perfectly actually. It's obviously just my lack of stabilizer. Isn't that funny? I don't need another frame. Right, well, I will leave that to set and cool for a moment, and then we'll come back and finish up our Wonder Wallet clutch. Okay. Right, so once your wallet has cooled down a bit, that should be nicely set into place. Don't worry too much about the bottom. We can always make that into a bit more of a curve in a little bit once we're finished. Right, you should still have 4 small strips of Decaville. So we're going to put 2 of those to one side. I'm going to use the other 2. I'll take these pins out. Now we're going to fuse 2 and 2. Okay, so they're going to go in these top edges of the wallet. It's not a bad idea to mark the centres, because we've got the centres for everything else, so we can line them up nice and neat. Okay, so just open up your layers. Try not to stretch your lining layer too much, and then we're just going to line that up along that top edge, and this gives us a little bit of extra thickness for our frame. I'm just going to press that into place. That should fuse nicely for us. Oh, it hasn't. I wonder if I need a bit of steam on this, or maybe I'm not hot enough. See, let's have a little spritz. Of course, I've always used my big iron for doing these. See if that's stuck a bit better. And then the second one, pop that into place. Line up the centres and the raw edges. And then give that a little press, fuse that into place as well. Okay, right, I'm going to just line up my fabric edges now, pop a little clip in there, and then we'll add the extra Decaville onto this side as well. Got clips everywhere here. I have. Oh, I should put my pin. Why am I putting my pins in my ironing board when my pin cushion is right there? Who knows? Little spritz, and just make sure that mark my centres on my strips so I can get them all nicely lined up. And all I'm doing is just popping one at a time inside, line up these top edges, give us a little bit of extra stability, a bit of extra thickness for the frame there. Fuse that into place. I do find that until they cool down, they're still liable to come unstuck. So just take it easy when you're adding these pieces in. Have a little press down like so. so. And our wallet is coming together now. We're nearly done. Right. If you've got time, why don't you leave that to just set for a minute, cool down. And then what we're going to do is just make sure that the length of our exterior matches the length of our card slots inside. Make sure these raw edges line up here. And then we're going to base those into place using a 1/8 of an inch or 3mm seam allowance away from the edge. Just trimming these extra threads. They always come, don't they, though? Okay, make sure everything's nicely lined up, because this is the top edge that's going to go into our frame, into our bar frame. Okay, so I'm just going to stitch along the top edge there. I might as well use a basting stitch. So just pull everything else out of the way however you need to, and then start my needle down so I can adjust my hands if I need to. So I'm just sewing an 1/8 of an inch or 3mm away from the edge. Make sure that everything's lined up how it should be. I've got a little ruckle there, so I'll pull that out of the way. Lovely, and the same the other side. There we go, lovely. Right, and that's just going to hold everything together while we fit our bar frame. Okay, you might want to double check that everything is still fitting as it should be. Oh, what did I do with my, oh, there are my screws. Whew, gosh. Might want to double check that everything is fitting as it should before we go any further. Yes, lovely. Okay. Now, the first thing you need to do is decide which side you want your opening to be on your frame. So I'm going to get my board up here first, so that I don't have to adjust it once I've got everything lined up. I can just go as I am ready. If you've got a soft surface that you can work on so the frame doesn't get scratched, that's also very good, but I'm just going to work on my board. Right, that's all nice. Okay, so let's have a look. I've got my zip opening from left to right, so I think that's probably how I want mine to fit. So this frame piece with the opening, that's going to go on the front of your wallet, and the screw holes go on the inside. Okay, so what we are going to do is just mark that opening. So pop your frame on. Let me check I'm doing this the right way round. Am I doing this the right way round? Yes. We're doing our holy one first. Okay. So make sure that that's nicely pushed on into place, however you want it. And then we're going to mark the placement for that cutout there. Okay, so just draw around the inside. Okay, and pop that to one side for the moment. Now I've got a set of punches, which is very handy. If you haven't got a set of punches, then you can always just cut around that with tiny scissors. Let's see which one is the right one to use. Is it that one? Oh, hang on, there's a piece of fabric still in there. That'll tell me the look. No, it's not that one. That's not the fabric I used for my last one. Is it one of that? No, too small. Should probably have labelled it, shouldn't I? Was it that one? Oh, it could be that one. Yes, I think it's that one. Okay. Will I remember between sewing wonder wallets though? That's the question. Right, so we are going to line that up on the corner cutout. I'm just going to turn my microphone off so you don't have to listen to me hammering away. But basically, let's fold that back. Basically, I'm just going to be punching that hole out of my fabric, okay? And in theory, and it is, I can see that it is, the centre of this hole should be lined up with the centre of your fabric. Okay, I'm just going to turn my microphone off. Okay, so I've put, oh dear, I've gone a bit too far. Punched a hole right the way through all of my layers. And if there's any little threads still attached, you can snip those off. I'm going to cut through the top of that oval as well. Okay. So, I don't know if you can see, I've cut my oval and then the top edge out as well. Okay. Just double check the bar fits again. Still got a few threads there to get, and I like to sort of wiggly slot it into place. Yeah, okay, so I just need to trim a few extra little threads that I've got around the top of my wallet and where I've cut my hole. If you want to, you can always colour in these layers. If you want them to not be quite so obvious in your frame, just pop it on and then give it a little wiggle into place. Make sure that everything is nicely lined up, and if you'd like to add some glue, then that is always a great option. Oh, I've got another thread. How have I managed it? Gosh, I am threads galore today. Oh dear. Right, check everything is all good. Yeah, thought I had something in one of my screw holes then. I think it was just a reflection of the colour of the bar wallet. Now I'm just going to add a little bit of glue into my frame and run it right along the bottom edge of that bar frame. And then I can slot it back into place. Make sure all the layers are in and we're pushed right the way up to the top of the bar frame and everything's nice and even. Check it's all good on that side as well. Yep. And then I can add my screws. Now I know I moved my screws. There we go. You can see this is a common occurrence, can't you? Me losing screws when I put them down. And I wonder if I've got a little magnet somewhere. That would be handy, wouldn't it? Have a little magnet just to hold on to those. No, that would be too easy. Oh, I've got a magnet in my screwdriver set, of course. Silly me. Okay, now let's see if there is an image. Yes. Okay, my green screwdriver. So if you've got the same screwdriver set as me, I'll always, in my pattern, add a little bit of the screwdriver in the image so I can remember which colour screwdriver I need to use to add my screws. Okay, so I've magnetised my screwdriver. So I need 4 screws for this end. Let's get those 4 out. And of course one's fallen in a rivet hole, hasn't it? Oh dear, not having much luck with these screws. They're so tiny. Right, so I'm going to do one of my end ones first, and I'm not going to screw it in all the way. I'm just going to screw it in part of the way. And then one the other end. You can punch holes through your fabric with an awl before you add these screws if you like. Right, once I'm happy that that end is in, then I can finish screwing this one into place. Make sure those are nice and flush with the bar frame. Okay, and then I can add my middle ones. So I'll add that one in, not all the way, but most of the way. And then this final one here. Oh, hang on, I've gone in a bit wonky with that one. You'll find if you're going a bit wonky, they don't go in all the way. Right. And that one there. Okay, lovely. Is that not convinced that one's in as far as it will go. Oh, I've threaded it now as well. I might have to get an elastic band to finish that one up. A slightly bigger screwdriver will help. What size is that? 6, 6, 8. That one. Oh, I wonder if that's the same size as that one. I don't know. There we go. Right, perfect. Okay, so that's half done. Oh, that does look good, doesn't it? I do like that. Okay, now what we're going to do is fit the second half of the frame. You don't need to clip yours back like this. I'm only clipping it back so that you can see, and we don't have to cut any holes for this one, fortunately. We can just slot that into place and check it's all lined up. Let's find the center of my fabric there. And I'm going to add a pin into the center there just so that I can make sure everything's nicely lined up. Because I want my wallet to line up nicely on the sides, don't I? Let's pop this half of the frame on. Lovely, and just make sure that, oh dear, I've slotted my frame into place and left my wallet behind. Oh dear. Right, I just want to be sure that my edges of my wallet line up on the side as well as inside the frame, so that looks pretty good to me. Lay that down and hopefully open it up and leave that. Oh dear. Oh, it was such a good plan. Oh, it was such a good plan, and then I moved it out of the way. I think we're just going to have to go for it, you know. I think we're just going to have to center it as best we can. Okay, I'm going to add a little line of glue to this half as well. Want it to be nice and secure. I'm concentrating a lot here, can you tell? Not saying anything because I'm concentrating so hard on getting my glue into the centre of that channel. There we go. Okay. Lovely. Right. Let's slot that onto this edge. You can give it a little wiggle into place. Let's check that that is in place on that side. Yep, lovely. Okay. 4 screws again. Oh, got 3. There's the 4th one. And we're going to do exactly the same as we did last time, except this time I'm going to try and not thread a screw. Okay, one side, do the other side next. You can tell when I'm concentrating because I'm much less chatty. Just peel my protective film back slightly. Okay, put this other end in, that one, push that one all the way. And I can tighten that one, right. Peel my protective film back now. Seeing as I'm going to be putting it to use pretty much straight away as soon as I've finished. I might wait for the glue to dry first, I suppose. There we go. Okay. And the last screw. Excellent. Right, finished tightening up that one. There we go. Okay, that's the last of the frame added. Right, I'll try not to lose those 2 screws just in case I need those for future. So what I'm going to do before I use this, I'm just going to wait for the glue to dry just to be sure that everything's all good. Check everything's lined up nicely. Yeah. Now, if you want your wallet to have a bit more of a rounded shape to it, all you're going to do is give it a bit of a steam press and then just sort of cup it in your hand while it's still warm from the steam. Not so much so that you'll get a scalded hand, but just give it a little gentle steam press and then just gently cup it with your hand like that. And that will give it a nice rounded shape. But there's our Wonder Wallet, our Wonder Wallet clutch, or our Wonder Wallet. I mean, I suppose you could just use it as a wallet. This is the size wallet that I carry, but if you are somebody who is a bit more of a minimalist, you probably only really use it as a clutch when you want to avoid taking a handbag or a purse with you. You can just take this little clutch. We've got our sides folded in there. I've still got my protective film on. Better take that off. Got our sides folded in there. You can just train those by tucking those in, and they should sort of train over time. You can have your base a little bit more rounded like mine, or you can have it completely flat, however you like. And then we've got our card slots, our zip pocket and our slip pocket inside there, and it's ready to be used. I hope you liked sewing this. Hope you enjoyed sewing it. I love my new Wonder Wallet, and this is going to be my one. So if you see me out and about, this is the wallet that I will be using. And I really hope that you make one for yourself or as a gift or for a friend, and I can't wait to see what you make. So please do tag me at the Makespace, and or post it on our Bag of the Month Club page, because it's a Bag of the Month Club pattern, or on our Facebook group, the Makespace. I would love to see what you make. I hope that you do make one of these, and I hope that you enjoy it. I can't wait to see what you sew. Thank you for joining me. Bye bye.